This is an exciting time of year, Rube.
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, and it's you kind of want to raise your level in the postseason, whatever you're doing, whether it's a podcast or writing a story or anything. It's just everything's kind of intensified. And it's been I think I was looking this up. Like I started covering the team in '88, which is when they started going to the postseason. I've covered like 75% of their playoff games.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy because obviously there were no wild cards before '78. So there weren't a lot of opportunities to go to the postseason. But the Eagles' greatest postseason successes all started since I covered the team. I think there's a cause and effect there.
I think so. Yeah, they really wanted to raise their level of play.
They did. For me,
Jeffrey Lurie has nothing to do with it.
Well, that was Norman Bremen.
Yeah, but a lot of it has come under Jeffrey.
Yeah.
This is Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. 4:30 p.m. on Sunday, the second-seeded Eagles will host the number 7-seeded Green Bay Packers, a rematch of Week 1. This was always the most likely opponent entering Week 18, but now it's finally set in stone. I'm excited.
Yeah, and a rematch of opening day in Brazil. This time you don't have to go quite as far from South Jersey. It's a little closer to the link. It's an interesting matchup, and you don't usually expect a team like an 11-win team in a wild card round game if you're the number 2 seed. Kind of thinking maybe a 10-win team, a 9-win team. Kind of maybe not a walkover, but maybe 10-point favorite and that kind of. It's not like that. I mean, Green Bay's formidable. It's not going to be an easy game. Yeah,
this is a tough 7 seed. You're right. And you think back to like the other 7 seeds we've seen in recent history, like they're not this good. So it is a tough draw. But if the Eagles are going to get to the Super Bowl, they're going to have to beat good teams at some point. So it's certainly a winnable game. The Eagles opened up at 3.5-point favorites. It went to 5.5. It's now at 4.5. So it's somewhere in that range. There's some uncertainty about the quarterbacks in this game, which could lead to some of that movement. I think Jordan Love's going to play. I think Jalen Hurts is going to play. I think these two teams are going to have their quarterbacks, which is what you want for a matchup like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be shocked if either of them not only plays, but isn't 100%.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if Love will be 100%.
Maybe not, but I think they'll both be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First thought, like when you heard it's the Packers, like what's the first thing that goes through your mind?
First thing that goes through my mind is the 3 previous playoff games with the Packers that all had memorable finishes, 2 in favor of the Eagles and 1 in favor of the Packers, but they've all been really exciting games. I mean, the 1960 game at Franklin Field, the championship game on a Monday, with Bednarik at the end of the game, the dog interception, 4th and 26 game in 2003, and obviously the Michael Vick, Riley Cooper, Tramon Williams game in 2010. So they've all been memorable games, and Eagles have come out on top twice. And so I kind of feel like it's going to be that kind of game. I don't think this is going to be a 17-point game. I think it's going to come down to the 4th quarter, and whoever the better team is at the end of the game is going to win it. I think it'll be the Eagles, but they're a good team.
Yeah, certainly a formidable opponent. We'll be talking about the specifics of the matchup a little bit later in the week. We'll get into some of it today, of course. We're ready to answer a bunch of questions. We're going to do that a little bit later in the podcast. We have questions from listeners, but if you have a question and you want to ask it to us in person or virtually on Wednesday night, I have some good news for you. We have a live Q&A from Stinger's Waterfront, Ridley Park, PA, 7 p.m. on Wednesday night. Myself, Reuben Frank, Barrett Brooks, Ashlyn Sullivan, all out there for that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I hear their food's really good. So come on out early, get some dinner, and then ask us some questions.
Yeah, it's going to have a much different feel than the Q&A we did this time last year, getting ready for the Bucs playoff game, where we're talking about, are they going to fire the head coach? A little more optimism heading into this season.
I remember doing that, and one person came up and said, you guys sound really pessimistic. Is there any reason for hope? And we're like, no, they're going to get killed. And they did. A bunch of stuff going on Wednesday, not just the Q&A. The Road to Victory bus tour is back tomorrow, January 8th. Come celebrate the Birds with exclusive swag and special guests, plus a chance to win tickets to a playoff game presented by Ticketmaster. Go to NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com for the full schedule. Downtown Wayne. I love Wayne. That's a cool little town.
Yeah. Okay.
They have a coffee shop and a train station. And I love train stations. I love coffee shops. So it's like,
what would be like if they were playing Guided by Voices in that coffee shop? Would that be like your heaven?
They do play good music in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I think I've ever heard. I heard Guided by Voices in a coffee shop up in Bethlehem. They played a little.
Did you just put it on? Is that?
No, I didn't put it on. I was up there. Yeah, but yeah, you don't hear them all that much at coffee shops. But yeah, that's big for me. You need good music to be a first-rate coffee shop.
I get that.
But we'll get into that during the off season. I'll run down my top 10 all-time coffee shops.
We'll have plenty of time for that. We have football on our plate today.
We do.
Okay, so in front of me, Rube, I last night I was thinking about this. I have 5 reasons for optimism as the Eagles head into the postseason.
Okay.
And then 5 areas of concern.
So just to be clear on this, when you say last night, like what time did you sit down and like, was it midnight?
It wasn't quite that late. It was probably like 10-ish.
So 10 p.m.
I picked up my parents. My parents were on vacation, so I had to pick them up at the airport, drop them off at their house, went home, ate dinner. So it was probably about 10 o'clock.
Did they enjoy their cruise?
They had a good time. I want to shout out American Airlines.
How about this?
Customer service. I told you about this. This is unbelievable. My parents had a flight from Fort Lauderdale to Philly that there were mechanical issues. It wasn't even the snow. There were mechanical issues. It got delayed like 12 hours. It's a helpless feeling for me back here. Like there's nothing I can do to really help them. And they're stuck there. And the other flights are on time, but they're completely full. The customer service actually got them in a cab, gave them a cab voucher, helped them get their bags back that they had checked, sent them to West Palm, got them on a flight in West Palm, and they ended up being like 3 or 4 hours late, but they got home last night. It was really good.
Was that a nonstop?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So it was
love hearing that kind of story.
It was really cool. So I appreciate all those people.
We had a game against the Dolphins once, and I always would fly into Fort Lauderdale instead of Miami. It's just closer to the stadium and the hotels and everything. But one of the writers on Monday morning didn't realize he had flown into Miami and went to Fort Lauderdale Airport with us. And he's like trying to check in, and like, you're not flying out of this airport. I'm not going to say who it was, but we never let him forget that.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Happens in the cities with 2 airports a lot, like Chicago, or obviously
I had a cab
New York,
driver in Houston who did not believe I was flying out of Hobby, because Intercontinental is the main airport, but I had a flight out of Hobby.
Yeah, that Bush airport's like an hour away from downtown.
Far, yeah, and it's huge. But he actually did not believe. He made me show him my phone and my like the airport code on it, because he didn't want to take me to Hobby.
I kind of respect that, though. He's probably gotten a lot of people screwing that up.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into
enough of that.
Where should we start? Optimism or pessimism?
Let's start with pessimism, so we can kind of finish on a high note.
I like that. So reasons for concern, in no particular order here. Number 1, Jalen Hurts might be rusty.
He might be, and I was looking at the games he's played after missing time. Basically in 21 and 22, and his first couple games, he wasn't quite. He threw a pick in each one, so he hasn't been super sharp off those layoffs. I think that's a real thing, and he was playing at such a high level, obviously in a limited kind of role. He wasn't throwing 40 times a game like Tanner, but. I think it is a little concern. He threw 4 passes in the one game that he got hurt, but he's going to go a month without playing, basically. I think it might take a series or 2 for him to get where he needs to be.
Yeah, and by the time you're listening to this, hopefully Jalen will already been at practice, and if it's on Wednesday, and we can put to bed the thought of him not playing in this game. But he went down so early against the Commanders. I think it was 12 snaps into that game.
1 for 4.
He misses the next 2. And then, that was the reason why you thought, well, if he can clear for week 18, maybe they would think about putting him out there just so we can get a series or 2 under his belt. That obviously didn't happen. So we're talking about the better part of a month. He hasn't really played football. Yeah, I don't think it's like the sky is falling type concern, but the Eagles have struggled to score in the first quarter for most of the season. They seem to break out of that late in the year, but a slow start against a good team, it's not where you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. They've overcome some of those slow starts, most of them, but in the postseason, although they were down 14-0 to the Packers in that 2003 game, that was their biggest comeback. They were down 14-0. I think Robert Ferguson caught 2 touchdowns early in that game. They were down 14-0. But yeah, in general, in the postseason, you're playing good teams, and if you're down 10-0, you're generally not going to come back.
Yeah. Number 2, it's a tough first round draw. We already talked about that a little bit. The Packers are a good team. They're not great. I mean, they've lost to the great teams or the really good teams that they've played this year. the Packers, the Vikings, the Eagles, and they lost to the Bears in Week 18.
They lost to the Packers?
What did I say? Oh, the Lions, the Vikings,
Yeah.
and the Eagles. They kind of lost to the Packers last week.
They kind of did.
And a loss to the Bears. So I think they're a good team. And in general, it's a tougher road than if the Eagles were able to get the 1 seed. It just is.
Yeah, well, the bye for the main reason, but yeah. And I haven't looked up. John Clark asked me this. I don't know if there's ever been an 11-win team that's been a 7. I can't imagine that's ever happened. I mean, obviously, since they expanded the playoffs, it's probably never happened. So yeah, it's a tough draw. Having this game at home, and look, you've been to Lambeau, and I think this is a very good Eagles team on the road, but Lambeau is a different animal. So just not having to play there is big.
Yeah, that part's nice. And then, like in general, you think back to 2022, and that was just such an easy path to the NFC Championship game. It's going to be tougher than that this year.
Yeah, I mean, they had a walkover. The Giants didn't even put up a fight, and then the Niners lose their quarterback. And look, the Eagles made them lose their quarterback, Hassan Reddick. They tried to block him with like a backup tight end, which is probably not a good idea. So it's not like they had bad luck. They just, but after that happened, there was no contest.
Yeah,
either.
but a bye and then the Giants to get to the NFC Championship game. In this case, it's going to be the Packers and then either the Bucks, the Rams, or the Vikings.
Yeah,
not easy.
No, it's a tough road. If they get to New Orleans, they'll have earned it.
And I think they can. I'm not saying they can't, but you want the easiest route possible. Number 3, is the passing offense really fixed? We saw them against the Steelers, and everything was great. Jalen and AJ are doing their little dance, and we're going, okay, not a big issue. They've solved everything. In the back of my mind, I'm still wondering if it's going to be as efficient and as good as it needs to be when it really matters.
It's a fair question. And they haven't had a lot of those games. I mean, that was, but then you see like the other quarterbacks have come in and maybe used more weapons than Jalen did. Maybe he can, have more trust in a guy like Jahan Dotson now, or whoever it is. I mean, Goddard being out there is going to be huge. So I think they'll be okay. They've only had 3 games where they've had Goddard, AJ, and Devontae. 3 games all year.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, so having those 3, and those are the 3 guys Jalen really trusts and has thrown the ball to so many times in his career. So I think they'll be okay, but it's a fair question.
Yeah, and the good news is in this game, no Jair Alexander.
Yeah.
He's their best corner.
Big loss.
Without him, I mean, this secondary, you can throw against them. And I think the Eagles will be able to do that if that's what they need to in this game.
Yeah, and I think they will. I think they're, I think you're going to want to get Saquon going and have one of those 170-yard games, but they're not easy to run on, to good run defense, and I think they're going to have to make throws in the air. I really do.
Okay. Number 4, this pass rush could be better. Now, I remember a few weeks ago we're talking about how good they'd been as a unit. Since the bye week, it's kind of tailed off a little bit. They don't have that elite edge rusher. They have good players. They have a bunch of good players. They don't have a Hassan Reddick who kind of tore up the playoffs a couple of years ago on the way to the Super Bowl.
What do you have? 3.5 sacks, 4.5 in the postseason.
And knocked out the starting quarterback with a legal hit. So they don't have that player. I mean, they have Josh Sweat, who's good. They have Nolan Smith, who's good. Jalen Carter, who is very, very good inside, but sometimes it's tougher for him to get pressure because of all the attention he sees. You have Milton Williams, who's good. And I think if all of these guys play at their best, they're going to be able to get enough pressure. But I don't think it's as easy as if you had that star pass rusher.
Well, they really miss BG. And it's not just about his leadership, but I mean, he was playing at such a high level, and he gave you that extra edge rusher so you could have that rotation. And Sweat's had a funny year. Like, he had all these sacks in that one stretch, but that's kind of dried up. And, Nolan's been good. I think he'll be better next year, but he's not quite, he's not a star yet. What do you have? He finished with 6.5. So, yeah, the last month they just haven't gotten the pressure, and especially that Washington game, where how many times did Jaden Daniels drop back and they just couldn't get any pressure on him at all. And then Vic had to blitz more, and they picked it up, and that was a disaster. So, that's a concern. That's probably my biggest concern going into this game is the lack of pressure. And I'm sure it's going to be, I don't know what's going to happen with Sweat with his future. But I'd be surprised if the Eagles don't really attack that position in the offseason, because they got to get better there.
Yeah, they do. I think I've been asked a bunch about potential position in the first round next year. We'll see where they are and which players make sense in that range. But that's a position that I think they have to really start figuring out long term.
Yeah, agree.
So in the playoffs, we anticipate the rotation will be a 4-man edge rusher rotation with Sweat and Nolan Smith at the top, and then Jalen Hunt. Where do you think Bryce Huff figures into that rotation? Do you think he's above or below Jalen Hunt?
I think he'll probably be. I think they'll be close, but I would think he might get a few more snaps. Yeah, I think Bryce Huff would get. And I think it's important that he got to play a couple games after that layoff. I think your best chance to get pressure, and I think Jalen's got a bright future, but I think it's with Bryce Huff.
Yeah, he ended up getting some pressures in that Giants game. He had 5 pressures in that game, a few of them really quick pressures.
Yeah.
And I looked up the next gen stats on him. His get off time has been pretty good this year.
You're talking about Jalen now?
No, I'm talking about Bryce Huff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. His get off time has been good when he's been out there. I know the production hasn't followed, but if you're trying to find like a glimmer of hope in his pretty disappointing season, that might be it. Like the raw number, it's 0.78 seconds, which is up there with it's top 10 in the league among qualified pass rushers. So like, I think there's something there. Now he hasn't put it together yet.
Yeah.
And I understand if you're like, save the Bryce Huff talk. I get that because he hasn't produced, but I think there's a reason to think that, one big play in the playoffs can really kind of change the narrative on Bryce Huff.
Yeah, no question about it. Just ask Brandon Graham.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's true. Number 5, special teams. I think there's a legit concern that a bad special teams play could really hurt the Eagles in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Super Bowl, and I mean that was a disaster.
Talking about the Aaron Sipos punt.
Yeah, and the coverage on the punt, but and Jake Elliott's been up and down. Obviously, the kickoffs have been up and down. Better when Jake's out there. Had some coverage breakdowns,
had some penalties,
some bad penalties early in the season. Blocked punt. I think a blocked field goal. It hasn't been a great year for special teams. They've had some great moments, and they have some really talented guys on those teams. But special teams been a little shaky this year.
Yeah, definitely up and down, like good moments, bad moments. Last year, when the defense was like a train wreck and the offense wasn't as good as it needed to be and it was stale, the special teams was like the saving grace of that team last year. They were so consistent, so good all year, and it hasn't really been the case this season.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's definitely something. And Packers have a really good returner. So
yeah, Nixon is dynamic.
Yeah, he is. So I mean, he's probably maybe not quite as good as Turpin, but he's close.
Yeah, I mean, he's been doing it for a long time. He's dangerous back there, and you have to. Yeah, it's a little scary, and we'll see if they have Jake Elliott. I would think they'll have Jake Elliott kicking off in the playoffs.
Yeah. I think you have to
try to get as many touchbacks as you can.
Yeah.
Okay. So of those 5 concerns, the pass rush to you is the biggest?
Pass rush to me is the biggest.
And keep in mind, I mean, Jordan Love, one of the things he does so well, he does not get sacked.
No,
he's been sacked 14 times all year.
That's an incredible number.
And now the offensive line in front of him is playing well, but a lot of it is just him navigating the pocket and getting out of tough situations.
And he stopped throwing interceptions. He threw a bunch of them early, and he just stopped. He hasn't thrown one in like 7, 8 games. So, it's a challenging combination there.
So those were the 5 reasons for concern. We'll flip it to the reasons for optimism.
Yeah, because right now I got the Eagles losing 45-6. So you better get to the optimism.
And to be clear, I think there are more reasons for optimism. I think you should be optimistic about this team. This is a 14-win team, and it was not like a fluky season. They earned the number 2 seed. 14 wins. They went on that run, that win streak that was unbelievable. Since the bye week, I think they've been the best team in football.
Interesting. Yeah. 12-1.
Yeah. It's hard to argue that, right? So number 1 is just
and really the one was just a terrible quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So since the bye week, they've really had, and they've been up
and without their quarterback.
Yeah. So that's a good way to put it.
So a lot of reasons for optimism. I think they are one of the best teams in the league. Number 1, this offense is just so talented. I mean, I know it hasn't all come together perfectly this year on offense, but you just like look at this collection of talent.
Yeah.
You have 3 of your 5 offensive linemen are Pro Bowlers. One of them is a first alternate who's not.
Who might be the best of the bunch.
Possibly. You have a quarterback who has just been playing really efficient football. You have a running back who ran for 2,000 yards. You have 2 receivers who are maybe the best duo or one of the best duos in the league. And you have a tight end who, when he's healthy, is one of the best dual threat tight ends in the league. So I understand that it hasn't been perfect this year, and relative to expectations, they might have underperformed, but the talent is just incredible.
Yeah. And, we touched on having Dallas back. I think that's just so huge. And in the games they've had Dallas, AJ, and Devontae, they've averaged over 30 points a game, which is kind of where I thought they would be for the season. I thought they'd be a 30-point, and they didn't. They ended up, I think, at 27.2, I think. So it's close, a field goal here, a field goal there, but potentially, I feel like every time they have the ball, they're going to score. I just feel that way because of that talent. And it's, again, Howie deserves so much credit for putting this group together. There's no weakness on this offense.
Yeah, there really isn't, at least from a talent perspective. And sometimes that's enough. Number 2, just be really confident in Vic Fangio and this defense. It's funny because you think back to the first 4 weeks of the season when everyone's still trying to figure it out. But since then, this defense has been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Save that fourth quarter against the Commanders. They've just been so good. It's not a fluke. Vic Fangio has been just everything is advertised. And with all this youth on the defense, they keep getting better and better. I have so much confidence that, even if they don't win the Super Bowl, their defense is going to keep them in every single game.
Yeah, that's true. Other than Tampa, they've been in every single game, and Tampa just kind of has their number a little bit, or they have. But yeah, they're fun to watch, and they play so well together, which is a little surprising to me because there's so many new pieces. And you look at Quinion and Cooper and Nolan Smith playing a bigger role, and Nakobe playing a bigger role, and Zach Bond playing a role. He's never been a starter before, full-time starter. And you just go right down the line, and everybody has played so well together. And I think that's what makes them dangerous. We have the number 1 defense in the NFL that didn't have an interception. That just tells you they just play
from the
well.
Corners.
From a corner.
Yeah.
From a cornerback. Yeah, they had a bunch from other guys, from safeties mainly. But entirely, all this. Well, Zach Bond had 1.
Yeah.
Kobe had the 1.
Yeah, the game winner.
Yeah, the game winner.
Mostly from the safeties.
Yeah, mostly from the safeties. 6 for CJ, 4 for Reed, and 1 for Sidney. So yeah, they force a lot of turnovers. They're just a really solid group, and man, they're fun to watch. I just I think in most cities, you kind of fans just really enjoy when the offense comes out and you have a chance to score. It feels like at the Link when the defense comes out, people get just as fired up.
Well, you're allowed to make noise.
That's part of it, maybe, but
no, it is a fun defense to watch, and the style of defense they play is fun, and you can have a fun. That's the cool thing about this defense is that yes, they want to prevent explosive plays with a too high shell. It does not have to be passive, boring football like we've seen under some other coordinators here. You can be aggressive. You can smack somebody in the mouth, and this defense is showing you that.
Yeah, they're really physical. Put yourself in. So at the end of last season, obviously it was a disaster. So Howie and Nick sit down for the first time. Once Nick knows he's got a job.
Yeah.
What do you think's the number 1 thing they said has to change in 24? Because I have a theory about that.
The number 1 thing that has to change in 24?
When we're building the roster for next year, what's paramount? What has
on
to
the
happen?
roster or in general?
Well, both, I guess.
I think in general, they're probably hyper-focused on the offense, honestly, and breaking it free of the staleness. I think that was probably the focus. Now, you can argue they haven't done that as well as they should have, but my guess is that with this ownership, with Jeffrey and how he values offensive football, that was probably their top thing, was to find an offensive coordinator and basically take the offense out of Nick's hands a little bit more.
That's certainly possible. My thing is, how many times have we heard Nick use the word physical this year? 1,000. And there was not a physical defense last year. And they had some good players. They had some players that played well for much of the year. They were still a top 10 defense, like with 6 weeks to go before the 49ers game. But I just think they said, we've got to get physical guys in here. And we've got to get guys that aren't afraid to hit, aren't afraid to tackle, aren't afraid to stick somebody, because they got embarrassed on defense the end of the year. I'm sure both these things came up prominently, but I think that's the biggest difference on this defense is the physicality they play with. They just didn't have that last year. Even when they were playing well, they were more of a finesse group.
And I think that flows into the mindset of the team in general.
Yeah.
This is a bully of a team.
Yeah.
And they got bullied last year.
Sure.
You think about the offense and you have that offensive line and the way they run the ball. They dictate the terms of what a game's going to be. And then on defense, guys like, we can shout out a lot of guys, like Zach Bond comes to mind. CJ Gardner-Johnson comes to mind as far as the new additions. Yeah, like Josh Sweat is a super physical player, always running back to the football. Nolan Smith, always
Nakobe.
retracing, and Nakobe. Like that, you're right. There's a lot of physicality on both sides of the ball, but the biggest uptick has been on defense.
Yeah, and then certainly Cooper DeJean and Reed. Even Quinion, even Slay's been a physical corner this year. He's a lot more physical than he used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how he's evolved that way. But
Jordan Davis, tracing back. Jalen Carter is
certainly.
Yeah.
Jalen
Carter's a bully.
It's fun. And he's going to intercept a kill at some point.
I hope so. That's just such a fun play.
It is.
Number 3, this team's healthy. We talked about it 2 years ago when they went into the Super Bowl with all 22 starters healthy, how rare that was, how we'd never see that again. And here they are 2 years later entering the playoffs. They're going to have all 22 starters on the field.
Yeah. And they've managed the injuries. They tend to be a little cautious bringing guys back, and it's smart. It makes sense. And, I don't know if there's a direct connection between the way they practice in training camp and being healthy in December or January, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And
I think some of it is luck. I don't want to just give them all the credit in the world for
soft
this.
tissue. That's not going to be related to, but
like a guy tears his ACL, he tears his ACL.
Yeah. I'm sure some of it's luck, but I think they're really smart and they're pretty cutting edge as far as all that stuff we talk about, nutrition and sleep and GPS for how far they've run. And, Nick has these rest days for the older guys on Wednesdays, walk through Wednesdays. I think everything's geared toward, you can't control everything, but I think everything is geared toward giving them the best possible chance to be healthy. And that's a huge advantage.
Yeah. And getting back to the luck aspect of it, they have had guys banged up throughout the year. Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert among them, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, like all these guys have missed games or a game here and there, but then to be able to rest those key players in week 18. And by the way, we didn't talk about this after Sunday. No one got hurt.
Yeah.
Not even a backup. There were no injuries in that game. There wasn't one time where I was like with my binoculars out looking at the blue tent, seeing who went in there, who got out. Because even though they rested their stars, there were other guys who were contributors who played in that game. And I meant to mention that on the post-game pod, and we didn't. They came out of the game really healthy.
Yeah, I remember one of these meaningless games in 2001 against Tampa, down in Tampa. And the Eagles knew they were playing Tampa going into the game. They knew they were playing them in the wild card game here or at the Vet. And so they played all the backups, and Ike Reese suffered a season-ending injury. And he still jokes about that's when you put in the guys like me who they can afford to get hurt. But there certainly were guys who played that they're going to need on Sunday. Yeah. So that's big.
Yeah. And just to have 22 and look, they've lost some players along the way. Brandon Graham was a big loss. Britton Covey is on IR. They miss him because it puts more on Cooper DeJean's plate. Yeah. Ben Van Sumeren, who we haven't really talked about, but big time special teams contributor. So it's not like they haven't lost anyone.
But starters, yeah.
But starters are healthy.
He wasn't starting. He started one game. I haven't seen Ben Van Sumeren all year, or since he got hurt. I haven't seen him around. But it's huge, and especially when you look at some of the things that the Packers are dealing with, that's an advantage.
Yeah. Number 4 is pretty obvious, but Saquon Barkley in this offensive line, I don't know if they can run against everybody, but it certainly feels like that.
It does, and that sense of anticipation Like every time he breaks a long run in the fourth quarter, it's usually preceded by like a 12. And you're like, all right, it's coming. It's like, it's here. It's coming up soon. And then you just see him running away from everybody. There's just a sense of inevitability.
Nailed it.
That he's going to break a big one. And most of the time he does.
It's just such a weapon to have, him and that line, because you get to dictate the way you want to play. And the cool thing is, even if you get down, which has happened to this team throughout this year, they're able to stick with it because of how dynamic a run game they have. And I think that's something that most teams don't have. Like, I think all teams want to be able to run the football effectively, but they don't trust it when things go poorly. This team can trust it and they can stick with it.
Yeah, because your chances of hitting a big play running the ball is the same as throwing the ball. So why do you throw all the time when you get down, like say 10 or 14 points? It's because you're trying to hit a big play. Well, they can do that running.
And number 5, they get a couple home games here if they advance, and that's a big deal. And there's no guarantee the Lions are going to make it to the NFC Championship game.
They've been good.
They're a great team, no question about it. But man, I part of me is still wondering if these injuries catch up with them in the playoffs.
Yeah,
when they have to win against a really good team to get to the championship game.
Yeah, I mean they're tough to beat at home as well. I mean it's hard to imagine them losing at home, but yeah, it could happen. And having an NFC Championship game across the street would be unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think it's
in play.
It's definitely in play. And just to be able to start there, I know you wanted the 1 seed. Everyone wanted the 1 seed. And this team, you can think back to a few plays here and there that they were that close to doing it. Didn't happen. But being the 2 seed's still pretty good, even though you get a tough first round draw. You can beat the Packers. They're definitely beatable. Then the game after that, I think, is right there for them too, depending on who, like, no matter who it ends up being.
Might be an easier game than the first one.
Possibly. Yeah. I think that's definitely in play.
Yeah.
All right.
It's good.
Those are the reasons for optimism.
So how are you weighing it all?
I think you should be optimistic about this team. There's no guarantee they get to the Super Bowl. Once you get in the playoffs, things can happen. But I think you have to feel good about their chances right now. I don't think the path is as easy as it was in 2022, and that certainly plays into this. But there's, like, the NFC is wide open. I really believe that. And you don't have the top quarterbacks in the NFC.
Yeah, that's true.
All the top quarterbacks are in the AFC right now in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Goff's been really good. I know you're not a huge fan of him.
All right.
But yeah.
You put him up there with Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar?
He's close.
No, he's not.
Yeah, he is. We had this conversation last week, but he's pretty good.
Okay.
He's pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean, if I had to rank him, I'd put the 3 AFC guys ahead of him, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Jalen's too far down that list.
No. But in terms of the quarterbacks,
it's interesting. Maybe we can talk about this more Thursday, but Jalen's been really good in the postseason. He's played more than almost anybody his age. He's only 26. Jalen Hurts only 26. This will be his 6th playoff game. He's thrown something like 130 straight passes without interception in the postseason. Hasn't thrown one since that first Tampa game. Completed like 66% of his. He's been a really good postseason quarterback other than that first Tampa game. So you're getting, and look, Jordan Love played well, obviously, last year in the postseason. But I think, in Jalen, you have a really playoff savvy, experienced guy who's been through, I mean, he's played at a high level in the Super Bowl, and you got to feel good about having a playoff savvy quarterback.
All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we'll look at Super Bowl odds and we'll give our top 10s plus some questions.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we've got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store and nissanusa.com today.
All right, we're back on the Eagle Eye podcast. I have Super Bowl odds in front of me from DraftKings. Only 14 teams left in these Super Bowl odds. The only chance for one of these teams to win the Super Bowl.
I guess that would be true.
Yeah,
if you're not in the postseason, you
can't win it.
It would be really hard to win it.
Number 1, the Lions, plus 280. Number 2, the Chiefs, plus 350. The top seeds need to be there from a
Sure.
mathematical perspective. Like they have one fewer game to play. Are you cool with the Lions having shorter odds than the Chiefs?
I think so. They're
Okay.
just playing better.
Yeah, I think they're a better team, but there's also just this inevitability about Kansas City that I can't shake.
I mean, the Chiefs don't even have a Pro Bowl quarterback.
It is funny. I mean, I understand why Mahomes wasn't a Pro Bowler, but it is funny that
It's crazy.
he might be the best player in the league. He's not a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
He hasn't played like it this year. But all right. No. Ravens are next, actually, at plus 600.
Really?
And then the Bills, and then the Eagles. And then there's a drop-off. So Ravens plus 600, Bills plus 650, Eagles plus 700.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we talked about this last week. There's 5 teams that are kind of have gapped the rest of the league, and the odds reflect that.
Yeah. The Vikings next, plus 1,600. Then the Packers at plus 2,000. So Packers right there. That's like we said, it's a tough draw for a 7th seed. And I wonder how much of the Eagles' odds are because they're playing a good team in the first round.
Sure, I would think that would affect it.
Yeah. Finish it out here. Bucks at 2,500, Chargers plus 2,800, Commanders plus 4,500, Rams plus 4,500, Broncos plus 6,500. Between the Texans and Steelers, who do you think has the longest odds to win the Super Bowl?
I would say the Steelers.
Steelers at
lost,
plus 9,000.
They lost their last 3 or 4.
Really stumbled into the postseason.
Yeah. Backdoored in.
Yep. All right, let's get to our top 10 rankings. We've done this now for really like half the season. It's been fun, and we talked about it yesterday. We're like, do we want to continue to do it? And yeah, why not? It's fun. All right. Yeah. So number 1 team in your power rankings is
the Bills, despite that devastating loss to the Patriots.
Really? Okay.
I'm keeping them there.
That's surprising to me.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't play their starters.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying
I'm not going to let
you had them at 1 last week?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I had the Chiefs at 1 last week, and they stay at 1. That loss did not deter me.
Carson didn't play so well.
Didn't play so well, but if he does, I don't think I'll have to play again. So
yeah, and they don't have good receivers even when they're all healthy. So I have the Chiefs too. So I have Bills, Chiefs, and
so I have the Bills at 4.
Yeah, and so we've been different on the Bills all year. Once I had them number 1, they haven't lost a meaningful game since, so I just keep them there.
I get that. So I have my top 4 are Chiefs, Lions, Eagles, Bills. Your top 4 are Bills, Chiefs,
Lions,
Eagles.
Yeah. So I moved the Eagles up from 5th to 4th.
You really like that Tanner McKee game?
Well, no, it's more the Vikings getting killed by the Lions.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you had the Vikings ahead of them last week. Okay. So where do you have the Vikings now?
I have them next.
I had them 6. I have them behind the Ravens.
Oh no, I do. I have the Ravens and then the Vikings. My bad. So yeah, I have the Ravens 5th and the Vikings 6th.
Yeah. Who's 7?
I got the Commanders 7th.
I have the Packers there.
Okay.
I think the Packers are better than the Commanders.
It's interesting, and obviously that was a big topic this past week because those are the 2 possible teams.
And I thought we both agreed that the Commanders would be a better draw for the Eagles.
Yeah, but I've just been really impressed by the way they've played, the way they've finished games. I still would have rather played, if I'm the Eagles, I'd rather play the Commanders, but I think it's kind of a separate thing.
Okay.
The fact that, I mean, from an Eagles standpoint, you almost beat them with your backup quarterback. But I still think they're formidable. Certainly the biggest surprise out of this group.
And you have them 7-8?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll just flip there. Who are your 9 and 10?
Chargers and Buccaneers.
Oh, me too. I put the Bucks in there.
Yeah.
Bucks offense is really good.
Yeah, they're well coached. Todd Bowles is a good coach, and they were 4-6, and they've lost 1 game since then. So you always watch out for the hot team going in, the team with momentum.
You look at them and the Rams after slow starts, like really getting better and kind of coming back from a slow start.
The Rams were 1-4 and finished 8-3. I think that's not enough games, but probably finished 9-3.
They only played 16 this year.
Yeah, I know. Well, the Bills last year, right? Yeah, so I really think there's a line of demarcation, the top 5, and then everyone else.
What do you make of the Vikings man, they lose that game. They just couldn't score in the red zone. Like that game was right there for them.
Yeah, it was.
And it was weird to see like Justin Jefferson drop some passes in there.
Yeah. Yeah. He overthrew him on the one in the end zone.
There was the one where like you could tell he thought about like getting his feet in before he secured the catch.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know what to think of them. I think they're well coached. They're talented, but there's just something missing. I don't know what it is.
And obviously, if you get the 1 seed, your odds are so much better than where they are now.
Yeah, no doubt. If the Eagles played them, I wouldn't be super. I mean, look, they won a ton of games. Would they win 14?
Mm-hmm.
So do the Eagles. If they played them, it's going to be here. It would be be a tough game, but I like the Eagles' chances.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are better. I think the only team in the NFC that you can say is better than them is Detroit. But I mean, the injuries, man, like
I know
they're so banged up.
Kind of reminds you of the Eagles in 17.
This is worse.
It's worse, but that was significant, and they overcame it. I'm not sold on Minnesota's quarterback. I know his stats are really, really good.
Yeah, I knew you've never been a stat guy.
I never have. I don't really get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating to look at it. We'll keep this going for another week. It'll be fun as teams get eliminated. See where we put them.
Sure. I want to get some questions.
Yeah.
All right. We'll finish the podcast.
I love the questions.
If you have a question for us, you can email us. It's eagleeye@NBCUni. That's NBCUNI.com. We have the QR code on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, you can send us the question right there. It's new and fun. You get to scan the code and then send the email. It works great.
Scan the code?
Yeah, try it. See if you can do it. This is exciting. We've never done this before.
No.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Okay.
eagleeye@NBCUni.com.
How about that? All right, let's get to it. First question here is from Lance. Hey, Dave and Rube, hoping y'all warmed up since the freezing game on Sunday. You guys are great, and I absolutely love listening to the podcast.
Thank you.
I just got warm.
It was cold.
It's going to be cold on Sunday again. Get ready for that. Looking ahead to this matchup, I've heard over and over again that the Eagles are on pace to have all 22 starters and even their specialists, except Covey, available. Considering how many starters have been available under Sirianni except for 2023, when we didn't have A.J. Brown against Tampa Bay, at what point do we start giving Nick credit for the fact that this team doesn't have any significant injuries? It feels like we're not appreciating the fact that almost no other NFL team has maintained this kind of injury success over the course of 4 years. Am I wrong? And there's another question we'll get to.
Yeah, and I mean, I really think there's a connection between the way they practice and the recovery, the emphasis on recovery. Every summer, all the former players come to training camp and they all just rip them, and because they had to go through 2-a-days and 3-hour practices when it was 95 degrees with, going full live goal line and short yardage, and they all just rip them, and then they end up being really healthy at the end of the year. I really think there's a connection, and yeah, I do think he deserves. I think Howie certainly has a lot to do with. And look, it was Chip Kelly who first kind of put an emphasis on some of these things in 13 and 14. So Nick, dug, and then Nick kept them. But yeah, I do think he deserves shout out for it.
Yeah, and I think it's like the organization more so than Nick.
Yeah,
deserves the shout. Not to take anything away from Nick because he furthers it, but the whole organization, like they've changed training staffs a little bit. Yeah. Throughout this, Ted Rath was here in 22 and he was getting all the credit, and then they had the 2023 season and he's gone. Now they're doing it again. So some of it's just pure luck. Some of it is like organizationally, they're good at this and they're limiting the injuries. They're limiting the exposure to get those injuries. It's tough because we don't really know like exactly like what's the percentage of luck versus what they're doing. It's tough to know, but I think it plays a role.
I also think and Howie's talked about this, the younger your roster is, the less likely you are to get hurt. And they have the youngest defense in the league, and I don't know where they are in offense, probably middle of the pack, I would guess, maybe a little younger than the middle. But the younger the roster is, the less you're going to get hurt, just mathematically. It's just the way it is.
That's a good point. And anecdotally, it's true.
Yeah.
You feel worse the older you get.
I wouldn't know.
The other question from Lance, what will be a realistic expectation to have for the 2025 playoffs? Should we expect this team to go to the NFC Championship, the Super Bowl? What do you think?
So the 2020. So we're talking about next year.
Well,
so
he means this playoff.
Gotcha. I think it's fair to expect them to get to the NFC Championship game. I do. I think if they can do that, I think it's been a good season. And I think they would certainly be competitive in Detroit if that's what it comes to. Obviously, if it was here, you got to win that game. I've seen them lose a couple home NFC Championship games in a row. But yeah, I think there's no I think anything less than getting to the NFC Championship game would be a little disappointing.
Yeah, I think I'm with you because they're going to be favored in this game, and if they advance in the next game, the only time they wouldn't be favored on the way to the Super Bowl is if they have to go to Detroit and play the Lions there.
That's the only
way. So, and in that game, I think I would still like their chances. I would, but if you get there, I think you feel pretty good about it. Okay. Next one is from Mia. Hi, guys. Why is it so unlikely for Saquon to beat the rushing record next year? Most of the offense will be here, and with Jeff Stalin, I would expect the O-line to still be great. Even if Kellen Moore leaves, it seems likely that we'll still be a run-heavy offense next year.
Yeah, just and I was started to look this up. I mean, the average guy that rushes for like 1,800 yards rushes for like 900 the next year. It's just really hard to. You don't see a lot of running backs stringing together big years, and it's just the reality. And it's not a knock on him, and maybe he could have another big, but there's just so many things go into it. Having a healthy O-line for the most part, just the games going a certain way, the play caller, and who knows if we'll have another play caller next year.
We should mention that Kellen Moore
and just Saquon being healthy, and there's just a lot goes into it. The teams you play, the run defenses you play. I mean, he's not going to hit like 560-yard touchdowns. It's just the odds say he won't. So I would think he'd have a good year, but just the math says, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a 2,000-yard rusher to do it again.
What's the most? I wonder what the most yards anybody had. Like even I think Dickerson. Isn't it funny? Eagles have a quality control coach named Eric Dickerson. No relation, but. I'll look that up. That'll be a good offseason topic.
Derrick Henry was within striking distance this year, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think Dickerson had 3 seasons with over 1,800.
Yes, he did.
So, it's possible, but I think the numbers tell you it's unlikely. That reminded me, we didn't mention Kellen Moore has been requested for interviews for 2 different jobs, the Saints and the Jaguars. So we'll see what comes of that. He can't even interview yet virtually until after this game,
the Wednesday after the game, whether they win or lose. Doug Peterson got fired yesterday by the Jags after 3 years. You think Doug will coach again?
No.
Not at all. Assistant, OC. Doug's like 58. I'd be surprised. I think he might not.
Yeah, I kind of think he might be done.
I mean, he was pretty burned out after 20 here. Took that year off. Got off to a good start in Jacksonville. They won a playoff game his first year, I believe.
Yeah, he turned that around quickly.
Yeah, he did the same thing here. But wish Doug well.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question is from Zaid. Hi, Dave and Rube. You're definitely my favorite Guided by Voices podcast by a wide margin. You have mentioned that defensive tackles often take a few years to develop, and Jordan Davis seems to have really grown and matured this season. Do you think the Eagles will pick up Jordan Davis's 5th-year option this offseason? Would you pick up his option if you were Howie? How does Milton Williams' impending free agency figure in to Davis's future? And he does a little legwork here for us. Over the Cap estimates Davis's 5th-year option to be $11.5 million. That will be in 2026.
Yeah, I would. I mean, the cap in 2026 is going to be, enormous. I think he's a good, solid player. And, we talked about this. Like, if you judge him on guys drafted in the first half, in the top of the first round, then he's been disappointing. But if you just judge him on what he's gone out and done, the consistency he's played with, the physicality, he's a good, solid player on the top defense in the league. So I would keep him around. Guys like that are hard to find.
I would try to keep him around. I don't know if I would pick up that option. That's a lot for him. And the likelihood he ever plays on that isn't great either. 'Cause a lot of times it's like a placeholder
Right.
contract, and the Eagles like to structure
And
their
that's
stuff differently anyway.
and that's why I would, because I think you'd probably give him a long-term deal. But
Okay.
but
But then you kind of cut his incentive to signing that long-term deal because he's got this big chunk of change owed to him.
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I guess the bottom line is I'm confident he'll be here. And I think Milton's the kind of guy who Howie's generally able to sign.
I kind of think Milton might get a contract elsewhere.
Maybe. He's played well. He's a good player.
Yeah, he showed up in a contract year in a big way.
Yeah.
By the way, the deadline for the 5th-year option this year is May 1st. So we'll keep an eye on that in the offseason. Next question is from David. Hey, Dave and Rube. A couple days ago, the Eagles released a video in which Brandon Graham presents his locker room essentials. It features a handwritten letter BG got from Sirianni as he talks about how much it means to him. It appears to be from sometime after he returned from his Achilles injury. I was wondering what you thought of all this, since in my opinion, it's a great example of the qualities Nick has as a head coach. I'm very curious regarding the backstory of it. And if you're interested, you could even ask Nick or BG. Love listening to all your pods all the way from Switzerland, and go Birds.
Well, I've seen that letter in his locker. It actually says, "Don't ever go on the radio again." No, yeah, I mean, and that's pure Nick. I mean, he's, that all the talk about connection is real. I mean, he believes in it. He lives it. And I think guys play hard for him partly because of that. And he wants to know, their kids' names. He wants to know, how long they've been married. He asks about their parents, and he's just really involved in their lives. And that's just another example of it.
Yeah. And when you cover this team, you get shown so many, even when you're not looking for them, you end up seeing all these examples of his ability to connect with his players.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Paris Campbell earlier in the year about that. And Paris Campbell almost turned down their invitation to come back on the practice squad because he let it, like, his pride was getting in the way, until Nick called him and talked with him and explained the situation. And then he ended up staying. I remember a couple of years ago, I did a big story where I polled like 15 players about how Nick had personally found a way to connect with them. That was one of my favorite stories I've done since Nick's been here. And they all had like a unique way that he's gone out of his way to just, whether it's like talking about family, or some guys, it was like their faith that they share, or like all these little things. Like he gave someone a book and talked, like he finds these ways to do it. And I think it does matter.
I saw him. We rarely see Nick in the locker room, but it was maybe a month ago we saw him leaving.
And that's by his choice, by the way.
Oh yeah. And I think that's true with most head coaches.
Mm-hmm.
That's the player spot. But he was in the locker room, and we see him coming out of the lounge. There's a player's lounge in the back. And we're like, what are you doing here? He says, I was playing ping pong with a couple of guys. So that's Nick.
Yeah. I think that is
probably beat him.
A neat thing that a lot of head coaches do. They stay out of the locker room.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Absolutely.
Next question is from Steve. Hey, Dave and Rube, is there anything the Eagles can do to keep Tanner McKee forever? I know when his contract is up, someone in this league would offer him a deal with the intentions of making him a starter. The way he played today and the last game shows he would outplay at least 5 of the starting quarterbacks this season, and maybe more. Definitely better than anything Daniel Jones ever showed the Giants. Is there anything the Eagles can do to prevent that from happening? How decisive and accurate he was makes me believe if Hurts went down with injury long-term, the Eagles would barely lose a step. Maybe 1 step, but not 2. Thanks again for everything you do.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I think you asked Nick on Monday if there's a chance with Kenny Pickett's rib situation that he could be the number 2 going into Sunday, and he didn't say no.
He sidestepped it.
He did, which was,
he's become really good at that, by the way.
That's all he does. But it was interesting because he left it open. And look, we all love the way he played. Look, Jalen's under this long-term contract, and he's played really well for the most part. But Tanner McKee's really, really talented. And I think at worst, he's got to be number 2 next year. I think if you get any kind of offer for Kenny Pickett, you take it, any realistic, reasonable offer. And it's not like he's played bad. I mean, Pickett's been fine the 2 games he's had to play, but there's something special about Tanner McKee. And we all saw it. And we've seen it because we get to go to practice and we see him do these things all the time.
I remember even in the summer, we're talking about if it's a 1 or 2 game thing, sure, throw Kenny Pickett in there, but we were talking about like contingency plans.
Yeah.
And we said even in the summer that if Jalen was going to miss any significant time, I think it would behoove them to get Tanner McKee in there.
Yeah.
I think their ceiling's higher with him than Kenny Pickett.
There's no question about it. We saw that. I mean, 4 touchdowns in basically a game and a quarter and no turnovers. He's got the third highest pass rating in NFL history by a quarterback in his first 2 games, behind like Stan Humphries and Mariota, Marcus Mariota, who remember his first couple of games were incredible. And the last one was too. But you know how he's going to get offers. You know he's going to get offers because, like the who wrote that? Was that Mia? No, that was a while ago. Who wrote this last?
This was Steve.
Steve. He's going to get offers, and I don't know where they'll start, but he is better than some starting quarterbacks, and he might be better than a bunch of starting quarterbacks. And you can't win as a franchise. You can't win a championship without a really good quarterback. You just can't. And he might be really, really good. And I'll tell you what, if I'm a GM, I would offer Howie a 2 for him.
Say you're Howie.
I wouldn't take it.
You wouldn't take a 2?
I wouldn't take a 2.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think I'd take a 2.
Okay.
I think he's untouchable for me.
Interesting.
A 1 and a 3, yes. A 1 and a 4, yes. You would take a 2 for McKee?
I'd have to think about that, but
yeah,
probably.
Yeah, I'd think about it. And look, the odds are he won't be a star. It's just, I mean, he played really well against a terrible Giants team. A 2 would be awfully handy. Yeah. I think Howie might take a 2. I don't know if I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question from Luca. I like this one. Dave and Rube, I was wondering if the Eagles are defending a Hail Mary and they put one offensive player on defense to knock the ball down.
Oh,
who would it be?
It'd be Tanner McKee, 6'6". You see him knock down that batted ball?
I don't think it would be Tanner McKee.
That's who I put out there. Who else is tall and athletic?
I mean, AJ has a lot of experience going up and getting the football.
Yeah.
Johnny Wilson?
Maybe.
You probably wouldn't do that this year.
Yeah.
Dallas Goedert? Big. Kind of tall.
How about Jordan Mailata?
I don't know if he has the athleticism of an AJ Brown in that situation.
No, maybe not, but he's got some pretty good size. He's just beat up everybody in the end zone.
You just stare at them until they walk off the field.
Probably get a DPI, but
who's the least likely offensive player to put back there?
Britton Covey.
Yeah, probably true. All right. Next question is from Scott. Hey guys, if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, do you think Vic Fangio retires?
No. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I know he said this is his last job, but do you think he will keep going with the Eagles after a Super Bowl win? If not, does he have someone else on his staff ready to step up?
Matty P is available. One thing about Hail Marys, it seems like they work more often than they should. So why don't teams just run them as part of their offense?
Because it's still a less efficient play than anything else.
Yeah, but when it works, you're getting 50 yards. And when it doesn't, they're just getting the ball at the 20 if they pick it off or at midfield. I guess that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to potentially lose the football.
Yeah, but I don't know. You have a chance to get a big play. I don't know.
You have a chance to get a big play within this offense.
Let's just change the subject. Just
it helps when a defender's drawing with the crowd.
That does help. It helps your chances. Can you repeat the question?
Vic Fangio. Oh, would he retire if they win the Super Bowl?
He has no. When I talked to him, I guess it was about a month ago now. No, he's definitely thinking he's coming back. Yeah, I don't think a Super Bowl would change that. And
but like in this hypothetical world, he retires. Who on the staff do you think would be able to fill in if they wanted to go that route? I have an easy answer for this one.
Who are you thinking?
Christian Parker. Could
be Christian Parker. Yeah, it's a good answer.
Now, Clint Hurt has been a DC, so if they want experience.
And who's going to say no to
him? That's true. Clint Hurt just decided he's going to be the DC. I think he could be a DC right now if he walked into Vic's office and said, hey, I'm taking over. Vic would probably go, all right, yeah.
You were over there when some guy when Clint came over on Sunday pregame, and there was a guy on the sidelines. He was this huge dude, looked like a football player or something, and he looked like a retired defensive tackle. He was just the biggest guy. Clint Hurtt comes over to say hi to him. He knew him. And then, like, all of a sudden, that guy was tiny, and Clint's, like, dwarfing him. Clint, he's a big dude.
It's funny because at first I thought you were talking about Hollis because Hollis was over there.
No, it wasn't Hollis.
Okay.
I don't know who it was. But, yeah, that Christian Parker's certainly a good answer.
Anyone else?
I mean, what about Wash?
Yeah, interesting guy. Jeremiah Washburn has been with this team for a long time. Coaches the edge rushers.
I think he's a sharp guy.
Definitely is. They like him.
Players love him.
He's outlasted his bosses here.
Yeah, he has. So, yeah, a couple good names.
Okay.
TJ Paganetti.
We're pretty long here. Rube, I have one more for you.
All right.
This is a fun one. Reading your observations after week 18, I noticed you didn't use an Oxford comma when listing the offensive lineman. Not a fan?
Not a fan.
I'm not either. I'm team no Oxford comma.
You give me two main clauses, I'll throw a comma in there. That's it.
Yeah.
Items in a list, not happening.
I'm trying to cut down on the punctuation. Let's just get to it, you know.
Minimalist. You're a punctuation minimalist.
Yeah, if you don't clog it up.
Well, I wrote a story for Monday with no commas, periods, anything. It was just words.
Stream of consciousness. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Innovator.
But I appreciate the question about the Oxford comma.
Yeah, I figured you would. All right. If you have a question for us, eagleeye@nbcuni.com. One more time, I'll remind you guys, come out on Wednesday night, tomorrow night, Stingers, Waterfront, Ridley Park, PA, 7 p.m. Myself, Rube, Barrett, Ashlyn Sullivan, all out there answering questions about the Eagles playoff run. Rube, you have any final words for us?
Yeah, and Stingers is really easy to get to. It's right off 95. You can actually see it from 95 south, kind of across from the airport, maybe a little south of there.
Yeah,
but
just if you're in traffic, just shout a question from 95. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's like I love when people email questions. You can ask your questions in person if you come out to Stingers tomorrow night.
All right. If you enjoyed the Eagle Eye podcast, also rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye, presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon.